Today, I want to revisit a lens that never quite became a classic. It's the Sigma 24-35 full frame lens, and its claim to fame is that it's an f2 constant aperture zoom. But before we get started, like this video, hit the subscribe button and consider joining the channel. Channel members get exclusive access to Filmmaker Alchemy, behind the scenes lessons and insights on the business of video production. Learn how to turn your content into gold. This lens came out 9 years ago, and for the excitement that it had at the time, it just hasn't had the staying power that you might have expected. Something like the Sigma 18-35, that's an APS-C lens, far more talked about, far more popular than this full frame 24-35. I want to talk about why that is, why that was, and where this lens still might have a place in your arsenal, even to this day. If you go over to Sigma's website, you'll see that this lens has been discontinued, and that's because it's an EF mount lens. It does come in Nikon F mount as well as Sigma's SA mount, but those are all DSLR mirror box style cameras, and there's no equivalent for mirrorless from Sigma. There's other alternates like the newly released Sigma 28-45. That's a mirrorless mount, probably more versatile of a lens if that's something you're looking for, like a fast aperture zoom. But I've also talked about that lens and why it may not be for everybody. This sits at a weird place in the market. It's kind of yesterday's tech from DSLR days. But it kind of came out at the end of DSLRs. As everyone was going to mirrorless, we had this announcement of the world's fastest zoom lens, this 24-35 f2. And while that might be a cool claim to fame, it was kind of too late for a mount, the EF mount that was dying. Right now, I have it mounted to my Lumix S9 via the PhotoDiox EF to L Fusion ND Throttle Cine Edition adapter, basically an electronic communications adapter. So I do get aperture control from the lens to the body. I also get autofocus with this, but we're going to talk about that in a second. And I also have internal ND control. We're going to talk a lot about why you might want this lens with this adapter on a body like this. Let's start with the S9, which is, for all accounts, a very small point and shoot, full frame. I shouldn't say point and shoot. I use it casually. Like people say run and gun. For the S9, I kind of use it like a point and shoot, even though it's definitely not a point and shoot. It is interchangeable, obviously, of course, but it's that size. It's a really small, pocketable, but obviously not with this type of lens. And I've got the ND throttle on there. That's because I've been looking for a good way to get internal ND on a L-mount style camera. We've been talking about this a lot recently. Internal NDs. I've been talking about it for like 10 years. And this still isn't quite my perfect option. I'd much prefer an electronic ND. This is a variable ND, meaning that it kind of works like any of those variable NDs, like two polarizers, and you twist them together and it gives you that ND effect. There are some problems with that when it comes to using polarizers to achieve your ND. You get polarization, either, the effects thereof, or maybe those are effects you want to see. Some people like polarizers for that ability to minimize reflections or see through water or whatever it might be. But that can also create some issues with the gradient in the sky, for example, or even skin tones. Polarization can be, a double-edged sword, pros and cons. And then obviously the 24-35. Why would you want a 24-35 f2? Well, as we've been talking about lenses recently, we've got a newly announced 24-60 from Lumix, a much smaller, lighter weight lens than this, but that's a 2.8. If you really want that fastest of the fast, f2 will get you close. Not quite as fast as some primes. They're like a 1.4, 1.2, but f2 is certainly fast, shallow depth of field on full frame. It'll give you plenty of bokeh. But that 24-35, kind of limiting. Something like a 28-45 might be better if you want that range. But if you really want that wide end, you got to go with something like this. The only other option really is to go to micro four thirds and get the 10-25. The full frame equivalent would be 20-50. And that's what I've been after. I want that 20-50 focal range because I find the 10-25 on micro four thirds so useful, but I wanted to pick this up and see how it compares. 24 is not 20, but it's certainly not 28 either. It's kind of right in the middle of the road. And if you want that 24, that wide to like medium range, and you want to maximize those benefits of full frame, getting that ultra shallow depth of field, this can get you there. You might be wondering, why would I want an adapter with a polarizer, a variable ND, built right into it? And I kind of was asking myself the same question. What's the benefit of having an adapter with just a variable ND in it? Why not just put the variable ND on the front of the lens, right? Well, as you can see on the front of my lens here, I've got a hood. And most of the time, these hoods don't play nice with variable NDs. So if you're looking for something, you want a variable ND, but you don't want it to interfere with the lens hood itself, you can stack it, inside with the adapter. But that presents the problem of you need to adapt a lens. You can't use a native mount lens. L mount is great, except there's no room for an adapter because it just is the mount. But if you take an older lens like this, an EF lens, and you adapt it to L mount, that gives you that extra space in there, letting you put in some kind of ND. Now, I'm gonna make a whole nother video talking about L mount and why I think we need more adapters. This is one of them. They're few and far between as far as EF to L or any kind of adapter for L mount, but this one does have the variable ND built into it, and I still get the electronic communication for autofocus and aperture, and I can still run a lens hood. And if you think of it as a benefit, this adapter does have a gear wheel for the variable ND. So if you ever wanted to hook up any kind of like focus teeth, if you want to do some kind of like pull on your ND, you can do that with this. I probably won't ever do that, but it's a sort of an extra benefit of having the ND built into the adapter versus something on the front of the lens. It's got the gears, so you can use them if you want. But for me, it's just about that lens hood. Keeping that attached to the lens, and I'm not worried about a variable ND up front, blocking it, getting into the way, limiting my ability to use a lens hood. I can keep that and have my variable ND built right in. Now, you might be wondering, what am I sacrificing by shooting this way? Well, certainly a lot. It's a heavy lens, it's a big lens, and that focal range isn't great. 24 to 35 is not as versatile as you might want it to be. Something like that new Lumix 24 to 60 is probably a whole lot better. It's gonna give you more range, it's gonna be lighter weight, it's gonna be smaller, but it is slower at a 2.8. So if you're willing to sacrifice the aperture and not quite have as shallow a depth of field, you get a whole lot more benefits if you're willing to shoot at a 2.8 compared to an f2. F2 comes with a lot of sacrifices and trade-offs. It's bigger, it's heavier, it's an older lens, so it's EF, not even native. So that adapter is doing a lot of work in terms of giving me aperture and focus control. And the autofocus does work with this adapter, but it's pretty noisy. The lens, it makes that jittery sound. I could probably turn it on here for you even in a second if you want to actually listen to what the thing sounds like when it's doing its autofocusing. I don't know if you can hear that. If you can't, then that's probably a good thing, but it certainly makes a noise. And it never stops, because if you're using continuous focus, you want to track a face, a human, whatever it is, even just continuous autofocus in general, it's going to make that noise. Now, I was curious if that was the lens itself or the adapter, and I tested it. So I threw the same lens on a different adapter, an EF to L mount adapter. That one's the Viltrox one, and it doesn't make as much noise. It's not constantly doing that like hunting. I can't say which one's better or worse in terms of performance. I haven't tested enough to say for sure, but as far as noise concerns go, this one is a little bit louder. Obviously, PhotoDiox, they could update the firmware. This adapter does have a USB plug. It's a micro USB for updates. I checked. It still just has the stock standard 1.0 firmware on it. That's all that's available that I could find. So maybe theoretically at some point in time, they update the firmware for better autofocus detection or performance, who knows? But in its current configuration, it does work. You can get face tracking and human, and you won't have the pulsating that you get on older Micro Four Thirds cameras. It still works as well as Phase Detect does. It just makes that extra bit of noise, which is kind of unfortunate. This is certainly not a setup I would recommend for everybody. It's more of a novelty, maybe kind of a gimmick, maybe a niche scenario where you have this older lens, because It is discontinued. You can find them cheaper than when they were brand new. So if you're looking for a budget option that's a fast full frame zoom, this might be a good choice. But there's probably more modern, more practical lenses out there that are, I would recommend more for general purpose. This is a fun, neat trick that you can do it, that you can get an ND, a variable ND in there in the adapter. Again, the options are very, very limited right now. I'm going to make a whole video about those adapters. But if you want the fastest full frame zoom, not anymore. Sigma came out with the 28 to 45. That's 1.8, so they beat themselves. But what used to be the fastest full frame zoom that never quite caught on, that never became the classic that maybe it could have been, had it come out earlier, when the EF mount was really all the rage. I don't know, maybe there's room in your kit for it. Maybe it's something that sits on the shelf as a neat novelty. Maybe you actually put it to good use. 24 to 35 is a focal range that I really enjoy, having that wide to like mid-wide range. 50 would be better, 20 would be better, but 24 to 35, I can use it and get some cool shots, get that super shallow depth of field you might be after. If you're shooting full frame, certainly a possibility, and play around with some adapting of old glass now. It's so funny being in the industry for as long as I have been, certainly not as long as some people out there have been. Maybe you're watching, you've been around a lot longer than I have, but now to look back and say that the Canon EF mount is old is kind of funny, because at one point in time, it was the most popular mount. It was what everyone was buying and using, and now it's starting to collect dust. So as those lenses, those EF lenses continue to circulate out there, people are moving to RF or Z mount or E mount or L mount. You might be able to find a good deal on some old EF glass that still can be used on modern cameras. And maybe, just maybe, you find a unique use case for it. That's what I like to do. Look at the old, look at the new, see how we can combine them in fun, interesting ways to get something that you really can't do any other way. I can't get an internal variable ND with L-mount glass. It's native. There's no room for an adapter. So where would you put the ND? Can't do it. I need to look to the past to use an adapter like that. And looking at the past, what lenses from yesteryear are worthwhile picking up, reusing, recycling? Obviously, the Sigma 18 to 35, super popular, incredible lens, APS-C, Super 35. It's not full frame. So to take advantage of the full frame benefits, to get an adapter with a variable ND in it, you got to look to this is about the only lens like it out there. There's nothing else in this zoom range at this speed really available anywhere. So it is kind of one of a kind, maybe a little bit of a unicorn, maybe kind of a hidden gem, so to speak. If you're looking for something like this, I can't say it's the best setup. I can't say it's the most practical, but it's certainly unique.